Welcome back to the Free Code Camp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week, we're bringing you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people getting into tech. This week, we're joined by none other than Ben Awad, who is a developer. He is a prolific creator on both YouTube and TikTok. And very importantly, he is working on a new game, which already has more than 100,000 installs in the App Store, called Void Pet, which I would describe as emotional support Pokemon.
Thank you, Quincy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, man. I checked my calendar before we joined this call, and the last time you and I talked was 4 years ago. And that's like a sixth of your life, right? Like, if you don't mind me asking, How old are you?
I'm 26.
Yeah.
So you can do the divisions.
Yeah. So that's a lot of time for Ben to be out of the fold. Sorry, I'm a Ben Folds fan. With the Free Code Camp community. But you've been getting a ton of stuff done. But first, I just want to address the fact that if you look at Ben Awad TikTok, if you look at Ben Awad YouTube, production has slowed down a whole lot. I just want to make sure that the Mafia didn't do a hit on your entire family at their family reunion, like in Punisher, and that there's that everything is cool.
They actually
Ben
did.
Awad land.
Sorry, no, we can't talk about it anymore.
All right. Man,
unless if you want to continue living, we can't talk about it.
Okay. Mom is the word.
The short answer is I've just been very busy working on Void Pet, the startup, and it's very hard to run and take care of two babies at the same time, and social media is its own baby and its own. I always saw YouTube and TikTok and Twitter as a thing that I invested into and I put thought into, and so once I stop thinking about those things, it's harder for me to do them in autopilot. I can't autopilot posts, basically. I put a lot of thought, even though it may not seem like it at times. And now that my thought is elsewhere, it's not happening at the moment. I'm going to post more in the future at some point in time. I don't think I'm done with social media, period. I still like social media and posting and making videos and talking about tech. But currently I'm just so swamped that it has been happening, as you've been seeing and as everyone else has been seeing as well. And they're like, when's the next video? And I'm like, I'm not even planning a next video at the moment, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeah, well, I mean, that's totally cool that you have too high standards to just put out, busy, merely serviceable content. You want to put out the really top shelf Ben Awad, and you're not able to dedicate the time and attention to be able to do that right now. So maybe we could talk about social media, just because a lot of people are saying social media is dead, or it's definitely a shadow of its former self. Elon Musk has been doing weird stuff with Twitter. I refuse to call it X because it's probably just going to be sold to some other company in a few years, and they'll rebrand it Twitter. So why bother switching? Obviously people are very paranoid about using Facebook products based off of Cambridge Analytica and the many scandals that have transpired. And is this just a company that I want to support personally? For me, that the answer is not really. And then at the same time, you've got TikTok might be banned in the US. Hopefully not. I am not. I'm a very anti-censorship, and I think it's a horrible precedent for websites to be just wholesale blocked like they are in China, for example. So, so obviously I'm very much loading this question, is social media dead? But what do you think about the social media landscape right now, as somebody who has, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of followers on TikTok and some of these other platforms?
I mean, I think the dope thing right now is Twitter's paying you money to post, and that didn't happen years ago. And that, it's a huge motivator, because if you're just derping around and putting funny memes on there, you now have the potential to make actual money. Now, unfortunately, it is kind of pennies, and you have to be really getting out there to get any kind of return. So that is kind of the downside too. But the plus side is now every single one of these social media websites is you can make money just posting on them, and that's very cool and that's very motivating. And so I really like that part. Making money is cool for just making videos and sharing it on that. I will say I think I have had less I've been enjoying like tech Twitter less than I used to, and I didn't know it's just because I've been like busy thinking about other things, or like the conversations have like changed a little bit. I'm like less interested, or I'm just like in a different point in my dev career that I find it less interesting to keep up with everything or to watch everything. And also, I just don't know if like things are like stalled out a little bit. I feel like when I started, it was just like JavaScript frameworks change so often and blah 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 blah. And then learned React, and then I just been using React for the last like 4 years or whatever. Like I feel like little things have tweaked, and I have to keep upgrading Next.js, and that's annoying. But like for the most part, things have been keeping like pretty low on the like major changes. I mean, there's been some pretty interesting stuff happening too. But
Yeah.
that's another can of worms. I still find it exciting. I also think now you have so many different options. If you don't like TikTok, go make a short on YouTube. If you don't like YouTube, go make a short or a reel on Instagram. So I think the cool thing is there's lots of options as well. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is slept on. You don't get paid unless there's like you do an accelerator program, but I mean maybe join the accelerator program. But also I think what they make up in or they don't have in monetization yet. I think they'll have it at some point. You just have like a ton of reach on LinkedIn, in my opinion, comparatively, and very few people are taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
That I would suggest that if you're interested in this sort of thing.
Yeah. So a couple points there. First of all, getting paid on Twitter. Yes, FreeCodeCamp does get paid. Like,
Bam.
it's pennies. I mean, we get like a few million impressions a month on the FreeCodeCamp Twitter, and I think it barely pays for the $8 a month,
Right,
like,
your sub basically.
verified check. But I mean, if I were like a comedian or somebody who is intentionally going out there trying to create viral content, I could
Right.
imagine potentially being able to buy a few meals a month off of that
Right.
money. Right.
Probably making a few
So-
hundo. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, like, it's kind of irritating because now the blue check mark associated with Free Code Camp is like almost like a pledge of allegiance to Elon Musk in the sense that we're willing to like pay. But like I've seen the algorithm that they open source, like assuming that's actually how it is, and the calculus
You can
is
always
like,
hide it too.
oh, you can hide
your
it.
check mark.
Well,
Yeah, there's an option.
I don't want to do anything that reduces our distribution within Twitter.
Oh yeah, no, I think
that's
you
why
keep
we got the check mark.
distribution. It's purely for what you just said. In the I don't want to look like I'm pledging allegiance to Elon. So
Okay.
they have a setting in there that you
Yeah.
can actually hide your check. And I would assume it does not affect your like where the, like because I know if you don't get the plan, they don't show you in the for you or whatever. I think
Yeah.
you still get shown in the for you. Other people just don't look at you and be like, man, that's a verified person. So there might be some like there's
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
but,
I think a lot of the people, like I think LeBron James and
it's
like
been
a lot of
watered
other
down now.
a lot of people out there who are really critical of it have already left Twitter anyway. So, yeah, I don't think
Don't
it's too
forget
big of a deal.
threads. You can always
So
hang out there.
yeah, we've been using Threads a little bit. We post occasionally on there. We haven't seen like really high engagement, but we'll see what happens. Like we definitely opened that account when it got announced just in case.
Yep.
Yeah, and what you said about like Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, in addition to TikTok, you're right. Like that short form video is almost kind of like a commodity that you can just slot in. As a creator, how do you think about like? Do you think this video is going to do really well on TikTok, but it's too out there for Shorts?
I actually do think like that.
Okay.
I think each platform has their own meta and each almost like community or like style of video. And if you just take 10 minutes and scroll through your YouTube Shorts feed, scroll through your Reels feed, and scroll through your TikTok feed, you're gonna see very different styles of video. And those are the different style videos that do well on each platform. And unless you're like really niched down and you've already like liked a ton of posts and you're now just getting recommended very similar content, even in the same niches, you'll get different flavors and different trends that I do think like that. I would still like, YOLO and, post on some other post the same video even if I don't think it's going to be the best for TikTok or the best for YouTube Shorts. Because also, even though you think that it's not going to be the best, part of social media is like you never know what your hit's going to be. And so you just play the lottery, see what happens.
Yeah, it's like how many at-bats you have, right? Like,
Yeah.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
There you go.
Says Wayne Gretzky, says Michael Scott, right? So let's talk about what you've been doing on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a platform. I always think of it as like button down Twitter. Like to some extent, everybody's there but it's instead of eating it at Taco Bell, you're eating it like the Four Seasons or something. And people are like much more concerned about how they're perceived. And it is definitely less like free flowing. But there is a dearth of really good content there. Most of it is just like, hey, I got promoted, like, and that's cool. Like
I don't
that's
know if
actually
there's
really
good content on LinkedIn, to be honest, and that's why I think there's opportunity. And I think like what you just said is like the perfect reason why LinkedIn is great is because everyone thinks of it as buttoned up. And I think my biggest tip for anyone who's trying to do things on LinkedIn is pretend LinkedIn is Twitter and now start posting. And if you can use that mindset, and I think the contrast makes your post stand out a lot better, and people like would rather consume fun content. Doesn't really matter what platform they're on. They would like if they're scrolling on LinkedIn, they're already in a weird place. Like if
yeah.
that's what you're doing that day, and like if you see a good post that's like funny, you're like, yeah, give me that a thumbs up. I don't need to give like, the fifth thumbs up to the person over here that's like, yep, just got promoted. There's like, 70 of those. Put some content on there for people that, that are stuck scrolling on LinkedIn. Give them something.
Yeah, well, I like the I just got promoted posts personally, just because that like reminds me of what social media used to be all about. Like it used to be about
Yeah.
Facebook, like people like we just bought a house, like those types of posts, feel good, positive energy, real updates from people
Yep.
that were not just designed to give engagement, but were actually designed to update friends and family and seek, validation. Like this is good, right? This is a big deal, right? And yet like I Facebook has become, at least the last time I used it, it was basically just a bunch of like, news articles and stuff like that. And I think they've tried to move away from that. But
Yeah, I haven't
in my
used
mind, it'll
Facebook in a
always
very
be
long
like
time.
the misinformation machine, essentially. Let's talk about your personal history though, because everybody comes to software development with a different, background, like different baggage, so to speak. You grew up here in DFW. I actually live in DFW. Are you're in Texas now, right?
Yeah, no, I'm in Texas now. I'm in
Which
Austin.
city? Austin.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're
yeah,
you're in
yeah.
the hipster Texas.
Exactly, exactly.
So
The blue dot.
yeah. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about your childhood here in Texas, just because I like to keep some chronology when I talk, and
Yeah.
so we're not just constantly jumping around through time frame. Like we don't want this to be like the movie Memento. We want it to be like every movie before Memento.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I was raised in Austin, and I played a lot of sports growing up, funny enough, and I played a lot of video games. League of Legends was like my go-to in high school, and I tried pretty much every sport, but the sport I did best was tennis up until freshman year of high school, in which case I just left high school and started homeschooling the remainder 3 years, and then I kind of just dropped that cold turkey and only played League of Legends. And then
You dropped school like
I dropped
completely. You
school.
just went straight to the league.
I just went straight to the league. And then also just, well, I mean, it's kind of funny. So I basically kind of started college early because in homeschooling, you can just do whatever you want. And so part of the thing you can do is just start doing dual credit classes. And so I would just like go to the local community college and do like dual credit classes would also count for high school diploma things. And you're also starting to get like the easy credits out of the way for college.
Yeah.
Um,
What was the
and then
impetus to switching to homeschool? Was it like that pragmatic, like, hey, I can get into college and get some credits, and like, was it like I'm just trying to short circuit this
it
4 year
actually wasn't
rite of
like
passage?
optimizing for college in like the sense of like getting credits earlier. That just like happened to be a nice perk that I found out later. The main one was I just like hated school and I was starting to like hate learning. And that's like a really bad place to be when you're like in your younger years of life. And I just like was like dreading it. And my mom saw that and she was like, all right, like let's see if we can like rekindle some love for learning. Cause like there's nothing that inherently, someone should like stop enjoying learning. It's if they're being forced to do things that they really don't want
Yeah.
to do and really dislike, and or like the format's not working for them. And I think that was very, very good for me because that actually allowed me to like start self-learning. And like I think that's how I was even successful as a programmer whatsoever is I got used to self-learning and enjoying self-learning, and that's like a very important skill if you're trying to be a good programmer because of just like all the things that you have to do when you first start. So that was very big. And then also the cool thing is like that allowed me to take a coding class because my high school didn't have a coding class. But when you're homeschooled, I could just take a free MOOC online, and then all of a sudden I'm like starting on the path for like these interests that I might even do in college. And then turns out I do that in college. And I started a computer science degree. And funny enough, my dad was a programmer, so I had like had some exposure to like coding. Like my dad tried to get me to start coding when I was younger, but I didn't like it, and I wasn't that good at it. And I didn't think too much of it. I was like, no, no, thank you, goodbye. But I tried it again when I was doing homeschooling. I liked it a lot better. There was like a 50-50 chance I was going to be a business major in college, actually, funny enough, because I also was like, I do not want to sit at a desk and code all day long. That was like something in my head I kind of knew at the age of 16 or 17. And so for that reason, I was very, very close to not getting a comp sci degree. But then I was like, the main reason I didn't do business, I was like, even if you get a comp sci degree, I felt like that was more valuable, even if you decided not to code, than to get a business degree. So I was like, all right, let's go a comp sci degree anyway. And whether or not I decide to be a full-time programmer with that, like, we'll see. Um, anyway, so I go to college and I go to DFW area. I go to a college called UT Dallas. That's in
Yeah, good
Richardson.
school.
Yep.
Part
Do
of the
comp sci
University
there.
of Texas super
Yep.
system of research institutions.
Yep, they're a good research school. They're a very nerdy school. Like they don't have a football team. The thing that they flex is their chess team. So I was like a good fit for that style of school as well. Um, and then after college, yeah, I got my comp sci degree. That's when I started doing YouTube like a little bit more seriously. Was like maybe a sophomore year of college. Roughly, I'd have to go back and date stamp it somewhere in there. And I just started doing coding tutorials of the stuff that I was learning in my free time because college doesn't teach you web dev. And I always wanted to build things with programming that I could actually use. Like that was like the first impetus. Like even when I was learning MOOCs in high school, I was like, okay, I want to do something with this. They taught me Java. So then the first thing that I built was, and if you ever tried to build like a web application in Java, it's a complete nightmare. So
Yeah.
I was too daunting. I wasn't able to do that yet. So I did an Android app. And back then you built it with Java, not Kotlin, for the new people out there. And yeah, I built funny, probably no surprise. I built a calculator and some stuff. My biggest app that I made was a League of Legends app, of course, where you could like look up your own summoner because I was building my interests and I was building something I actually wanted to use, which I think is really important when you're starting. So I was doing that, and then I think that was big, and I kind of knew these things early on. Like I want to make things that I can actually use, so I was starting to do web dev because I was like, that very clearly makes things that I can use. I can use websites; those are important. And here I am learning like algorithms, and I actually enjoyed algorithms though. So like I didn't have any hate towards algorithms. I just was like, hey, could you also teach me how to utilize those algorithms for something interesting? And that was the part that was always missing um, in the degree. But the great thing, free code camp and all those resources out there are there for you, free to use. There's so many things you can use now that you can just learn on your own. And they are just as good, if not better, than the college courses out there that are teaching you random things. And you don't even have to be in college to use them. So use them. And then that's what I did. And then I was making videos as I was learning because the best way to learn something is, funny enough, to then teach it. The like cycle I learned in homeschooling was, funny enough, I took a class in homeschooling that taught you how to learn. And in that class, they were like, all right, this is what you do. You learn something either by reading it, writing down notes, and then you go over to the wall and you have to teach the wall like what you just learned. And it doesn't even matter that you're not actually talking to another human. The fact that you're like trying to like synthesize what you learned is the important part. So that always stuck with me, and that's why I like started doing it in college. And also I knew like if I was interested in doing more than just being a software engineer, I needed to start like my personal brand and like started doing like things outside of just coding. And I knew like to start that I had to start somewhere, and I started with coding tutorials. Um, And that is where I started with that. And then, that's college. I graduate and I just start building stuff. And I don't know if you want me to keep going timeline
Yeah.
wise or like
No,
how
well,
the
let's slow down for a second because
yeah.
we just covered like half of your
I did
life.
jump. Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, kudos to your mom
Yeah.
for figuring out that you were burning out on learning, burning out on school, and
Yep.
taking the drastic action of putting you into homeschool. Now, of course, we've had lots of homeschoolers on the podcast. Madison Canna never went to any school, not even
That's
university.
crazy.
She's like homeschooled her
Yeah.
entire life, right? Works as a software engineer, very inspiring creator. And yeah, I mean, that's like a dramatic decision. Like I left school when I was bored with school and I was having problems with my family and I just basically dropped out sophomore year. And it wasn't like I was just chilling playing League. I was, sleeping in my car at the Walmart and, for about a year. And then eventually I got a job where I could like mop the floors at a grocery store before they opened and like do a bunch of stocking. And I was able to pay my friend a few $100 to like sleep on his floor. Basically, that was like what I was doing when I was around that age. But it sounds like what you had in your life going on was you had a dad who really wanted you to get you into technology. To credit to my dad, he bought a computer very early on. I was playing with a computer, but I was mostly just consuming. I wasn't really creating with a computer. But it sounds like later on in your teenage years, you got really into creating as well and using technology to create. So
Yep.
I think that's like super chill that you were able to do that, and you were able to like live the dream of going and getting a computer science degree at like the normal age, like the traditional student age. So you didn't wake up like in your mid 20s, mid 30s and be like, damn, I don't have a CS degree. What am I supposed to do?
Right.
Because that definitely complicates things. Having a CS degree simplifies the job search dramatically, right? It's like a proof of concept in you as a developer. This guy can actually get out of bed for his 8 o'clock classes and build the homework assignments and pass the tests and get the degree, right? So I think it sounds like you did your future self a lot of favors by
I tried.
yeah. And
Compounding interest.
yeah, and just a note on teaching the wall. I've never heard of that notion, teaching the wall, but it totally makes sense and it vibes with how I learn personally and how a lot of people I know learn. And that is like in medical school, they have this concept of watch one, do one, teach one. So you watch another physician do a procedure, then you yourself do it, and then you teach another physician how to do it. So it's like kind of like that 3-step process. And it sounds like you're doing something similar in terms of synthesizing what you've learned by teaching it. So that, of course, leads us to your very prolific programming tutorial career, which includes, among many other things, a React Native course that we published on FreeCodeCamp like 5 years ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, React Native has probably moved on a little bit from there, but
Definitely.
if you just want to learn the foundational concepts and stuff, Ben's got you covered with this comprehensive 4-hour course. But yeah, I do want to hear a little bit. Like, let's jump back into the chronology. I'd just like to take a moment to digest everything, like all the knowledge you just dropped. Let's talk about like post college. And so you're graduating with you were able to graduate with a computer science degree.
I did graduate. I have a bachelor's of computer science, and like you said, I did like tee myself up very well to then like go and get a software developer job or maybe like some job in tech. But funny enough, I just decided to not even use my degree whatsoever, and I just started like continuing making YouTube videos. And on the side, I started like building different projects. Now, the first project that I built, and part of why I built this project and future projects is I felt like I didn't have good ideas. And if I had good ideas, I would start a code company and like start doing that. But I didn't have any good ideas. So I was at a loss. So I was like, all right, I'll just build somebody else's good idea or $1 million idea. And if you ask a friend or family member, they always have $1 million ideas. So I was like, I'll just build one of their $1 million ideas. So what I started with is my mom really needed a way to just like keep track of all her recipes. She really likes cooking. She has like over 1,000 recipes that she bookmarks and keeps. yada yada. So I built a product called Saffron that's still live today. People still like using it. She still uses it. I still use it. But that was the first project I ever built kind of on my own. That was like a full, complete website. And later came a React Native app that I built as I was doing like these kind of coding tutorials on YouTube. And I kind of just split my time doing both of those things. And that was just kind of what I was interested in. And I did like a small amount of like consulting on the side to make some money as well. And then kind of I just continued that like blend of doing things for quite a bit of time. And after that project, I was like, okay, if I can't think of any good ideas, so I didn't think of any good ideas after that either. I'll just make a lot of bad ideas because through making these bad ideas, I'm sure one day I will come up with a good idea. And so I started making a lot of joke projects. And if you follow my YouTube, you've seen some of them. I mixed Instagram stories and the most popular editor, VS Code. And then I was like, okay, what if we do the same thing and we do it with Tinder and it's dating for programmers? And then I was like, what if you mix Clubhouse and you do it on the web and you mix it with Doges because Elon is pumping Dogecoin? Like I just like started making these
Yeah.
things because I was like,
And
I like,
Clubhouse, just
yeah,
to interject, Clubhouse for anybody who has forgotten about it, or like just barely
everyone's
even
forgotten
heard of
at
it.
this point.
But basically, it was like a party line type app where like you basically it's basically Twitter Spaces if you ever use Twitter Spaces.
Yeah.
But people would all call in, and so you can imagine having like Doge, which is like a kind of a weird internet memey way of saying like Shinu Ibu.
Yeah, it's a dog. It's a cool dog.
It's like a very adorable Japanese breed of dog. For whatever reason, it took off, especially among the cryptocurrency enthusiasts. And there was like Dogecoin, and then there was, which was created as a joke, but actually has like a lot of monetary value, much to the chagrin of the creator who like sold all his Dogecoin to buy like a used Toyota or something like that. And then, there's like Shiba Inu coin, which is as like
That one's a little bit more of a joke.
yeah. I mean, like a lot of these are just like, hey, it's a meme, get it? Like now buy some, you know.
Yep.
But so basically, it was like you were trying to hop on the Doge peakiness.
Yep.
The fact that it was really picking up steam.
There
and
wasn't
people were
any
joking about it a lot.
crypto related in the project, funny enough, and I never even introduced any Dogecoin. That was like a potential later thing. It was literally Japanese dog themed Clubhouse on the
Okay.
web was like a better way to describe the like
Nope.
state of the product when I was
It's an
building it.
audio product though. Like, do you have like
Yes.
Shiba Inu's barking, or like how do you
Oh,
incorporate
they were
them?
barking, but like that was the logo, and that was like there's like an energy to being a Doge, and so there's like that energy was imparted through the website, and so like it's one of those things where like Doge speaks to some people and it doesn't speak to others. So if it spoke to you, you understood and you connected, and you know it. Doge is almost like a symbol of like the underdog as well. And like at the time, Clubhouse like only was on iOS, and so they were leaving out the entire population of Android users that wanted to enjoy it. So
Yeah, that was a pretty elitist thing for them to just say, "Oh, you're not rich enough to own an iPhone. You can't use our app."
there we
But
go. Everyone starts on iOS, and they just leave
Yeah.
Android in the dust. Sad.
yeah. Well,
React Native.
Android, you'll get a lot more installs. You won't necessarily get more sales, but you will get a lot more
True.
installs if you make it multi-platform, which you can do using
Yeah.
React Native or Flutter, which we use for our mobile apps. Not a Flutter fan, huh? Or you can just do it like use Swift for your iOS version and use Kotlin for your Kotlin,
Sure.
and all these SDKs for your Android version, and you can just have like a crazy nightmare of like trying to get feature parity between the two. Flutter's a
be your
lot
life.
easier. Yeah, so that's very cool. So I never thought of Doge as the underdog, but it makes sense because like I think a lot of the crypto space people think of themselves as kind of like the underdog to traditional financial institutions like banks and stuff.
Yep.
So now that gives me a new lens to view the entire phenomenon of Dogecoin
There you go.
through. Yeah. So you're building all these quote unquote bad projects. Like the best
Yeah.
way to build bad projects or good projects is you build a bunch of bad projects, and it turns out, wow, one of these bad ideas was actually a good idea. Like Airbnb, who thought that was a good idea, but apparently it is a good idea, right?
Yeah,
Let's have air mattresses.
like
People can crash on our in our
Exactly.
living rooms.
in this case, I'd almost even describe them as a tier lower than that because I didn't even see a future for some of these things. I think Doge House was different. I actually did see somewhat of a potential future for that product, Doge House was the name of the clubhouse, the Doge thing. I did potentially see a future for that, but I kind of knew going in Tinder for programmers and Instagram stories for VS Code, there weren't really work. There was not like a future there. Like I did not make that with the idea that there's a future there. And maybe some other people are making projects that way and it still works out. But I see the inherent flaws here. And like I'm not even like trying to like, peel back or like handle the flaws. I'm just like the flaws exist. This is a flawed product. Like I'm making this flawed video as to practice my coding skills mixed with it's a funny joke, and like maybe this will give me an idea for a not flawed project down the road or next. In worst case scenario, somebody finds it entertaining or inspires them through the video, through the content. I always thought it was like a win-win. Either the product actually did better than I thought it would do, which none of them did. But I mean, actually, some of them did like a little bit better than I thought. I will admit. Like I ended up selling VS Code stories for some money, and so like that was cool. I never expected that. And like there's like a couple people that are like on their way and potentially going to get married through like the dating app I made. And I was like, I didn't think anyone was actually going to literally use this and connect with anyone. And so there were some cool things. But here's the thing: even though these were joke projects, I would always engineer them as if they were like legit. And I always, because that was my favorite part. I actually really liked building. So like, for example, it was so silly of me to do this, but I just like could not do this. Of like when I was making the like dating app for programmers, I made an extension for VS Code that you could type in. But then my brain was like, well, if somebody matches with you and you are not at your computer, you wouldn't see the match. And that'd be so disappointing if you left them for like hours because you had to wait the weekend and then you're back at your computer or whatever. So I was like, obviously we need a mobile app so you get a push notification when you match.
Yeah.
And so then I built an entire React Native portion of that just to support that. And it's like, you might as well be able to swipe on the app as well. So then all of a sudden we now have a VS Code and a whole React Native thing. I just like literally couldn't help myself. And it was like, that is how it's going to be, I guess. And so I was
that's
building
so interesting.
those.
So it sounds like your bad projects, like you're building them, but then they're kind of building you and bossing you around.
That's true.
It's like, okay, well, you committed to having,
There
Tinder
was
for
an
VS
actual
Code.
extension to each one that I was like, yeah, that just makes sense.
So it's like you're almost kind of like bullying yourself into learning a whole lot.
I guess you could describe it that way. But yes, like that was the other thing too. Like I got a lot better at engineering and a lot better at building projects through doing this. Because going end to end is very, very like helpful and useful, especially when you're like, okay, now that I've done going end to end, what would I do differently this time? And I would rework parts of like my stack and what I was using for the tech each time. And each time I'd like learn something a little bit different. And I like started to develop over time like this toolkit I really, really liked.
Yeah. And so having built several of these projects and having sold one, that first of all, talk about that experience. I don't know if you could talk about the numbers. There's some clause in the contract or anything.
I mean, I don't even know if I publicly said it already. It was for $9,000, so it was not like a oh yeah, exit, I'm chilling on a beach exit, but it was like I don't need to think about this project anymore, and I was not planning on doing anything else with this project, so I can just liquidate and you can have this. And it was just I got a random email that somebody was interested, and I was like, yeah, you could have it.
That's so cool.
I'm not trying to build on top of this. And also, there was all kinds of problems with it because as soon as you allow somebody to upload images, as you can imagine, what somebody would
moderation
upload
nightmare.
Exactly.
FreeCodeCamp will never have an image uploading. Thing.
I didn't want to deal with that, so
yeah,
I was like, you can happily take it off my hands.
Yeah. Well, I don't know many people whose random like side projects, especially ones that were intentionally bad ideas to start with, that they end up going on to sell. I mean, that's definitely a feather in your cap, man.
I mean, I think there's like technically some like potential there if like the idea is some people were talking to me about this at the time, which is like, all right, imagine you have like you're like selling it to businesses and the businesses like they really like when all the developers are like friends with each other and stuff, and they're like that's how they do their daily stand-ups, or they're like sharing a piece of code. They're just like doing a story easily in their editor and now it shares to their whole team. So there like theoretically was some potential there, maybe. I didn't feel like building that. That sounded boring to me. But yes, that was a fun time.
Yeah, very cool. So you've built a whole bunch of bad ideas. And without jumping too far ahead, like you ultimately did build an app with your co-founder, I think her name's Lynn, that is really like picked up steam. Do you want to go ahead? Am I missing anything by like jumping straight to that?
No, we can jump. We can jump straight to VoidPet. VoidPet definitely has been the most successful project I've ever worked on. This was not my idea. This was Linda's idea, and the reason I even started working on this project and I like knew it was good is because the project just like had like such high conversion on social media. It went viral on TikTok, and then a number of people that joined a wait list and like tried to like we had a password protected website and we made a TikTok about how look at this game that has a password on it. A ton of people tried it. I think it ended up being 2 million people attempted the website password, and then 100K of them actually joined our Discord from that. And I'd been doing social media for a very long time, not a very long time, but like 2 years, a year. And I had like maybe 10,000, 15,000 people in my Discord. So the fact that this project had 100,000 people in the Discord, I was like, oh my gosh, like this people want this thing. People really vibe with emotional Pokemon. Like that, just that idea, that concept. I never thought of myself as making a game ever because I didn't want to be the person that spent 2 years making a game in my room, publishing it, and then no one used it. Like that was very scary because I felt like I was that type of person. I was always the on the side of the spectrum of I was building too much first and not validating with customers, and then I was just sad because I spent all this time building and then no one wanted to use my thing. So gaming was very scary to me because it was like, oh, instead of finding out whether your product's bad in like 2 months, you find out in 2 years. And that was too scary for me. But this was different because I was like, whoa, there's all these people. I kind of know they want it. Like this, there's like at least this kernel of motivation. And so VoidPet was also like the easiest to like start doing. And it was like the first backwards project because the want was there before I built it. Whereas before I always built first and then was like, hey guys, look at this thing I built. This was like, people are waiting for anything to be built that is emotion related pets.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, let's just build this thing. And so that was exciting to me. It's like, now I just get to do the thing that I like, which is building.
So. Yeah. So this time it's different because you've gotten some form of validation before you start building, and you can be pretty confident that there will be an audience for it. So, I mean, to some extent, like that edifies the notion of just spamming ideas out there and seeing what sticks and then building it, just having a landing page or some sort of like Discord sign up. How did the password page work? People had to guess the password or it's just
people had to guess the password.
Once they guessed it, they told their friends?
So this is how it was structured. If you did not know the password, and the password was very simple. I think it was literally the name of the game at the time. Or like it was actually, no, it wasn't the name of the game. So VoidPet used to be called Nightmares. And then we renamed it to VoidPet because VoidPet has way better SEO and we got the .com. Like there's so many reasons why VoidPet was a better name than Nightmares.
Nightmares, like for an emotional support.
It's a little edgy too.
Yeah.
There's plenty of reasons why Nightmares.
I can see like it. Todd McFarlane's or not
exactly.
Yeah, Todd McFarlane's Nightmares. Something like that. Like
so
having
for
it be an edgy
many reasons.
Comic.
Nightmares got rebranded. So the password to the website was Nightmares. And so I think part of it was like, if anyone knew the old name to the website, they like could just like get into the game. So we didn't even try to make the password like 100 characters and it was like you were cracking this thing. It was like a client side form like this, there was no attempt to like try to make this that difficult. And like some people would go back in the TikToks and like figure it out, like that's the password and crack it. And then eventually we ended up making it so like, if you get the password wrong, you had a little message just like, hey, do you want to find out the password? Join the Discord. And you can ask people in the Discord. And then through that, people join the Discord. And then somebody finds the password and they share it and they get in through the game. And then that was like the whole thing. That was that, yeah.
That's awesome. So we were talking earlier, like we were going to talk more about VoidPet, but like let's talk about Discord because that is like, fertile ground for getting a whole lot of people talking to one another. And, there are probably millions of Americans, probably millions of people in other countries too, that open Discord every single day, and they're going to see like that annoying red badge notification, they're going to go silence all notifications, or they're going to maybe be like, why am I getting a notification? And it's just Ben doing that at everyone. Hey, check it out, like new release of Void Pets or something. But
True.
that is a way of getting people's attention, right?
It's the new newsletter.
It's the new newsletter. I like it. And it doesn't cost you $700 a week like my newsletter costs.
Yeah, that one is tough. But
yeah.
also, the people that open newsletters and the people that open Discord pings, there's probably a very small overlap. So you're hitting two totally different demographics as well. So I say it's the new newsletter. It's like the newsletter is like, how do you get a 13-year-old to read your newsletter? And the answer is like Discord, not a newsletter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really astute observation. That this is why we're having intergenerational discussion. You know, the Gen Xer talking to the Zoomer. But yeah,
Borderline Zoomer.
Yeah. So maybe we could talk about how you've used Discord and how you've leveraged that as a tool for keeping the community engaged. Because I want to learn. Like FreeCodeCamp, we have a pretty active Discord as well. We have Naomi runs that Discord. She's doing a great job of it. But like any insights we can have from the source, right?
I actually don't do any secret tips. I do two things. One, I use it for announcements, which is obviously because we just talked about how it's a newsletter. I have a very different stance about community than I think a lot of other people do, and that community managers and people that really like community probably think, which is like my general stance is if you are doing something interesting or building something interesting, people are naturally going to want to talk about it. And so they are going to form these communities and talk about this thing. And then once that is happening, you can choose to do two things. One, you can sit in the community and you can hang out with them, set up events, and try to foster it within that. I don't like that approach. My approach is if you just continue to build cool things, people will want to continue to talk about them, and that's like the better way to like keep the community alive. Like I think the way you like keep a vibrant community is like the thing that they are bonding over is like still interesting. And now I think there's also the like, you know, the best answer, which is you do both at the same time.
Yeah.
You're both building something that's interesting and you're also like engaging with your community and making sure that there's fun things going on and that like something. But and I think in like reality it's very hard to do both. So I always focus on the like, okay, let's make sure that there's still something like interesting that people want to talk about. And I don't always do a good job with that, but that's my goal. And then my other tip for like people that are running Discords is like hire or find somebody from the community that wants to be like the Discord president that handles like all the different Discord like things for you. I think that's very important because it's very hard to manage a Discord if you're also trying to keep the community live at the same time. Like all these things are like very hard to do at the same time. Plus there's people that actively want to help and be the president and make sure the community is like, you know, enjoyable because they enjoy being in it. So that's my always tip if somebody's trying to do a Discord and they're like getting overwhelmed, especially because like 100K was the first time I was trying to like manage a very, very big Discord. But even for my personal Discord, for my YouTube channel of like 10,000 people, I had a server president and that like helped a lot and like took a lot of the managing load off of me. And they also, I think they enjoyed it for a bit. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't. Sorry, Ian.
Awesome. So yeah, shout out to Ian for taking one for the team and being the Discord president. Very, very fancy, like President Business from the Lego movie. So just to recap your advice, if you keep doing the interesting thing, then people will just naturally talk about it. And yes, you can do some baseline level of management of that community to make sure it stays active and doesn't become, it doesn't descend into a crazy, Lord of the Flies type toxic environment,
Right.
which will often happen if you leave a Discord server on, the bots come in and people start complaining about the bots and pretty much it becomes a complaining Discord where it's just, I am venting,
All Discords devolve that way and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, but it's kind of like your garden will just devolve into a tangle of weeds if you don't actively manage it, right? So Discord is not any different from managing a garden, really. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the second. So you said, just to recap, you said you use it for announcements, and then you said you use it for two things. What's the other thing?
Oh, I know. My two tips was get a server president, and I use announcements. That was my two things. I don't really do anything else. I mean, I think I think a Discord's also very useful in the same way that like a YouTube comment section is useful, and that like I also like read a lot of people's messages in the Discord for like research. So like I personally just like read a lot of what people say
Yeah.
in my own Discord. Even though I'm not always interacting with them, they might even think I'm ignoring them and I never interact with them. The fact is I have like a lot better idea of what they think than they think I probably think, but you can't always immediately fix everything somebody wants fixed for them, but I'm like usually aware. Usually, sometimes I'm not, but I think the research one is very big of just like getting a pulse on what people think
Yeah,
of what you're
absolutely.
building or what your content's about or whatnot.
Yeah, and that's something like I do a lot as well. Just FYI, if you are watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. Guess the baseline that I played at the beginning of the video. Talk about an interesting thing that Ben has said so far that is of interest to you. I will read those. I read all the comments
Smash that
on.
subscribe button.
Oh yeah, if you're not one of the 9 million subscribers of FreeCodeCamp, you want to help us hit 10 million, go for it. But seriously, like, I love reading feedback. I send that email. One of the reasons my email costs $700 a week to send is because it's going to 7 million people. And that Amazon SES is the cheapest place you can send bulk emails.
I was gonna say 700 is pretty good for that too. I was like, man, who are you using?
Yeah. I mean, we've optimized the heck out of that. Like, it takes a lot of time to send 7 million emails,
Yeah.
and even at like the 10,000 emails a second like limit and stuff. So we've got like all these IP addresses that are dedicated for good deliverability and all this stuff. We warmed them up. We did all these things, and I'm like very careful about not including words that are spam words in my email. Like, so you can't say promo or bonus or anything like I only use the word free one time in the entire email, even though everything in FreeCodeCamp
Wow.
is free, just because
Yeah.
I don't want Gmail, which is like where 90% of our email recipients open the email. It's kind of crazy, the amount
Yeah.
of concentration in the email client market. But
I'm a Gmail user too.
yeah, do me a favor. If you're listening to this, go to your inbox, search Quincy Larson in the spam folder. And if you see any emails from Quincy Larson, say mark not spam, because that does help like teach Gmail that like, hey, Quincy Larson's not trying to send people like Viagra prescriptions or something like that, right? Like Quincy Larson is actually sending free full-length courses, free books, stuff like that. Because my goodness, like so many people are like, yeah, it's so weird. Like I always get your email, but then I checked and it's in spam, and I'm like, unfortunately, that's just the Gmail algorithm. Like there's nothing we can really do about that.
Yeah.
It has a lot of false positives, right? But by marking not spam, you will ensure that like you'll increase the likelihood that people will get it, and you will probably not have it go to spam in the future. So sorry for that little aside, but the thing is, I love reading the replies. Yesterday we got a reply from somebody who is like, hey, I've been receiving your email since 2016, and I've kind of like aged out of it, so to speak, because I worked as a machine learning engineer at Google. I work for the
Heyo.
federal government doing data science, and now I'm in a PhD program and I'm using coding to like solve physics problems. And like I feel like I know about as much as like the upper bound of what you're teaching through FreeCodeCamp, right? So
They
so,
probably
like,
phased out of FreeCodeCamp. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, cool. And I unsubscribed him, and I said thanks, and I just asked him if he had any, he or she, it's a he. The name was a very male name, but I asked him if he had any, anything else he wanted to share about his coding journey, or whether he'd written about it somewhere. Hopefully, I can share an update if he does. But I just thought that's so cool. Like we've got like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of alumni on LinkedIn Alumni Network, and many of them are working at like FANG companies and stuff like that. One of the questions I want to ask, just to change gears a little bit, we'll get back to VoidPet, but I have a bunch of rapid fire questions just to break things up. So
Sure.
one of them, you did not go get a job with your computer science degree. You chose
not.
to kind of build a reputation for yourself through doing like 365 days of coding tutorials. Is that right? You did like a solid year of coding tutorials?
Yeah, no, I think I did it like posting every day for a year. That
Let's
was a
talk about
crazy
that.
period. Yeah.
That's a crazy endeavor. If anybody's ever created a coding tutorial, it's not just like, oh, I just sit down and blah, blah. It's not like Let's Chat on Twitch where you just talk about whatever,
is
like
true.
what we're doing right here. You have to put a lot of thought and planning, come up with a topic, figure out how to like teach that optimally. Maybe you could talk about what that was like.
Yeah, so the reason why I even started doing that in the first place is because I felt like I was actually bad. Like I thought I was bad at making videos, and I thought I was bad at coding tutorials, and I also thought I was bad at coding. So I was like, the only way I know to get better at that is to practice it. And I was like, I'm just gonna like start practicing this every day. And there's something really freeing about just allowing yourself, okay, I don't really care about how this comes out. All I care about is that I make a video every day. And I think at some point that doesn't work. But for the first year it works. So like that, it was like that was like a huge growth period for me was to doing that. And I think one of the things I realized is people really enjoyed that style of coding tutorial too, because what that meant is it included all the errors. So I would make lots of mistakes in the middle of my coding tutorials. I would even rework large parts that I had told you, like, this is how it should work. And then I realized, you know what? Now that we have this in place, that doesn't really work anymore. But that is how I code when I'm not making coding tutorials. And I think the fact that being able to show that experience and how I think through the problems, I think a big thing that's missing from a lot of coding tutorials is like the thought process and the like how we got to that next step. I understand that next we're doing this, but like how did the person even think that that was to be next? And I think the thing that I realized people actually enjoyed and it also made it easier on me because it wasn't like I was like trying to make the perfect coding tutorial and I had to plan everything in advance. I'm like when I start like for example when I was doing a Slack clone or like trying to build this thing, I had no idea how many videos that was going to be. I had no idea all the things I was going to cover. I was like we're just going to start and see where this takes us and see where we go with this. And through that process, I was like, okay, well, I mean, obviously what makes sense next is WebSockets because we want this chat to like show up right away. So now that we're learning WebSockets, oh, you know what? We don't want anyone to be able to get our updates. We need to kind of authenticate these WebSockets. So let's like dig into that. And you know what? Now that we're doing WebSockets, maybe it doesn't make sense to like send REST requests for all these other ones. Maybe we should do a couple more WebSocket messages here and let's rewrite these things. And so like it just like would naturally progress and we would like add more and more. And that's
Interesting.
a very different style than most
It's almost
others.
kind of like a Bob Ross style. Like Bob
Yeah, you
Ross
could
starts
say
out
that.
like, I'm gonna paint. Here's my blank
Exactly.
canvas. Let's start with some mountains and like, oh, these mountains need some trees. Oh, you know what? Like the sky, it may not be a perfectly clear day. Like I haven't watched Bob Ross since I was a little kid, but like I love just kind of the additive nature of his teaching style. And I've always thought like you could probably teach a lot of things in a very engaging way if you use like that Bob Ross approach. Obviously, painting is very visual, and so people can very clearly see the dramatic progress from a blank canvas to like a finished painting and everything. But probably similarly with coding, would you consider yourself like somebody like who just kind of meanders through a tutorial, or do you have like an outline when you start a tutorial?
So I would say it's like a mix of both. Like I don't create an actual outline. I don't write anything down, but I do have like a rough structure of what I think I want to get to at some point. It's very vague, very rough, but I would say I'm probably closer to the meandering type. But also, I'd say I'm a pretty concise person, so at the same time, I'm not trying to meander, but maybe it's like we're meandering a little bit. And also, it's not always all good. For example, probably my longest course, I think, was like a 14-hour one. And maybe 4 hours in, 6 hours in, I actually just got really fed up with the package that I installed for doing database calls, and it was just really annoying me. And I was like, I actually can't do more coding with this anymore. And I just like ripped it out and we refactored all our like database calls because I was just like I literally could not take it anymore. And I like I can't recommend this package. Like I'm just like not enjoying it. Like we're not gonna like continue doing it. And like some people might have been like, okay, we're going to now throw away those 6 hours that we are using it and like start here and like start over and be like start from scratch. And like I just the thought of starting over like that just like so gross to me. And so like there's pros and cons because I know some people, they might be put off of that and like I just feel like I just learned 6 hours of this package that you then are just like is bad and you're not going to use. But I think like that's just like how programmers work on an everyday basis. And like you're gonna have that same experience in your day job or when you're coding a project on your own and you're like, wow, this is not cutting it anymore. Like this, we kind of have to
Yeah.
rip out this dependency. Like that is such a standard thing to do. But like if you watch tutorials, no one ever rips out.
Yeah. I can't imagine
That
being
was
6 hours into a tutorial and just
Yeah.
saying, you know what? Hey. Also, is this a marathon recording? Are you recording for 14 hours straight?
No, I broke it up. I just compiled it all into one video. As you know, like the YouTube gods love watch time.
Yeah.
So if you have like long videos, I was like, okay, I always split up my videos into playlists, but I was like, you know what, this time let's mash it all into one. Let's see what that does. Turns out, wow, it did a lot better. So like
Yeah.
mashing it all into one is actually a pro tip for YouTube tutorials.
Yeah. If you're
There you
creating
go.
like a YouTube course, doing the full length course works. Obviously, FreeCodeCamp is built on that notion of just delivering a single video that has like soup to nuts.
People
Bob's your
really
uncle.
like table of contents though, so make sure you put that
Yeah.
in the description still. Like that is necessary.
Yeah. So you would record this over a long period of time, like maybe you could talk about the recording of that 14-hour. Like, how do you get ready to record? Like, do you have like a kind of
So it's
8 mile
even
bathroom?
easier.
Like,
It's even easier than you think because I'm not planning out the entire course beforehand. I'm just like, okay, we're gonna start coding. I think that one did like a Reddit clone. All right, we're gonna start coding a Reddit clone. The very first video, we're gonna spend 10 minutes recording, and we're just gonna set up our, workspace. We're going to get VS Code set up. We might even install some extensions I'm going to use in that video. That way you don't feel like I'm doing like magic in the middle. And so I just like tell you like that's what I'm using, and like, hey, let's just do npm init to start our project, and like this is it, and we're going to install this package. And so I'd be like, yeah, I start a tut how I would start a regular project if I was coding this like for a private thing that I wasn't even planning on to share with anyone. I kind of do the same process for both. And for that, some people do a lot of outlining of like how am I do all this whole thing. For me, it's literally pacing in a circle, and then I'm like, I feel pretty good about this. Let's like jam some stuff out and see how it feels. Like for me, coding is like the outline, and there's like some cons of that. Like obviously you can write some bad outlines and you have to redo it. Um, and also, I mean, I still like, all right, I think I'm probably gonna use Redis for this. I'm gonna use Postgres for that. Like there's some
so you
rough
already have
things.
some like rough decision making in the background.
Exactly.
Kind of like when Bob Ross sits down to like probably mix his paint on his palette for the day. He's like, I'm thinking I'm gonna do like more saturated hues today or something like that.
Exactly,
Right?
and
You probably had some notion of like how he's gonna approach it, right?
And like here's the thing too, because I have done so many like SaaS projects, and like so many like I built Reddit and Slack and like these things, it's like I'm not rethinking entirely from scratch how I'm gonna do authentication. For example, first time I was thinking about authentication, I just thought about it for hours off camera, and like did lots of research and got it wrong like hundreds of times. Um, and so it also was like obviously the parts I don't know what I'm doing, I need to like research and think about those a lot until until I feel like I have a good grasp on how I might do it, and then I do a video and test it out and like let's
So you're
run
not
with it.
going into tech totally cold usually. You've
Yeah, I'm not
done at
usually
least one
going
project
totally
with
cold.
a tool.
It's like, all right, I have to at least read the docs of like how I'm gonna like build this thing out that I have a guess, and then now I have a guess. Let's try out my guess, and the try my guess out is usually happening on camera, um, and so that part can go wrong, but and like there's actually some parts of my tuts where I'll just like pull up the docs because it's like you know what, this is like a small thing. Let's see
And
where
that's
it is
what
in the
developers
docs.
really do in real life, right? They don't
Exactly.
have this encyclopedic, eidetic memory
So
of like,
now I would just pull up ChatGPT in the middle of my
yeah,
tuts. Probably is what would happen now half the time.
yeah. I had to like, change something with FFmpeg the other day, and
Yeah.
I just like I could go read the FFmpeg docs, or I could just ask GPT. GPT
Exactly.
helped me get it
That's a
done.
perfect use case, honestly.
Yeah. So all the parameters, I even like it made a mistake and it gave me like the wrong parameter, and I was like, wait, it's giving me this output and you said to use this, and it's like, oh yeah, here, let me just correct here's the entire line of code that you need to put in your terminal based on the output of this previous step. And I'm like, cool, it's so useful. Let's talk very briefly about AI, because AI is the thing that everybody talks about, and then we'll get back to creating. But how do you use developer tools like that are AI powered? Do you use GitHub Copilot? Do you use any of these other tools in its
I
day-to-day
use
capacity?
Copilot now. I think I didn't use it for like maybe the first 6 months because I thought I wasn't gonna like it, and I was like kind of anti. I don't like the idea of having to upload my entire code base to GitHub to be able to like synthesize things for me. I don't like that part, so I was resistant for a while, but once I started using it, it's just like autocomplete on crack, and I really like it. Like it
Yeah.
basically just like I type less. And so if I can type less, that's something I really enjoy, not having to type it all out. I don't use the function as much where I like am asking it to give me code snippets. Once in a while I'll do that, but I find like that tends to be a little bit more error prone. I like the things where it just like it happens to know what variable that I'm about to reference and close, and like the thing that's awful doesn't close the curly brace. Like it's still a little scuffed with curly braces right now, so that's like the worst part. Um, and so you kind of have to weigh, well, I'm gonna autocomplete this, but then I have to backspace to fix the curly brace, and sometimes fixing the curly braces is worse than the actual autocomplete. That there is a little bit of friction, but overall I'm a fan. I just think it like I type less with it, and that's a plus for me.
So, like with GPT, you're figuring out like specific instances where it's worth the trouble of using it.
Yes,
Whereas, like when I'm trying to get an FFmpeg command, and I could spend
exactly.
10
I think that's
minutes
a
like trying
perfect
to
use
look up
case.
the syntax and all the flags and everything. But in a lot of cases, it's simply not worth the time to correct the output, and you
I
kind of learn
found
these quirks.
actually the other time I use it now that I think about it is like it's pretty good at giving me ballpark SQL statements too. Like if I have some like crazy data that I want to grab, um, I will ask ChatGPT and it will like ballpark me like kind of the right place, and then I can tweak it from there to get there.
Yeah, awesome. Uh, a lot of people who are learning to code, like I have people ask me all this time, like, is it academic dishonesty if I'm using, uh, because
Yeah.
like, so academic honesty, we take that very seriously at Free Code Camp. We are, no plagiarism. Like, I'm very proud to say that I've never cheated on a test in my entire life.
That's great.
I'm like a hardliner, and I don't expect everybody to rise to
I'm
this,
not gonna take this
thing.
test.
But for me, like it's just like one of those things. Like I can't live with myself if I cut a corner like that. And a lot of people in the Free Code Camp community feel the same way. Like people that are learning on Free Code Camp, and they're like, I don't want to do anything that violates the norms of Free Code Camp. They ask me all the time whether this constitutes plagiarism or that constitutes outside help or something like that, right? So a lot of people will write and they'll ask like, hey, Copilot's, adding this code to my project. Is that okay for me to submit it? And what I tell them is like, technically that's not academic dishonesty in my humble opinion. You're just using tools, but maybe you're limiting yourself by using that tool, and maybe you're not ready to use that tool. How do you feel about like people that are learning to code, and do you think that these are going to become like a handicap, like somebody who's doing weight training and then they're shooting steroids in their arms to try to get faster results as opposed to just working harder and dieting better or something?
I think probably like at the very, very, very beginning, like when I'm learning what like an int in a bool is, it probably is worthwhile to like have a dud editor. Because even when I was first learning, they didn't start me in like a good Java editor. They gave me like Dr. Java or something. Like I'm not learning in like Eclipse where all like there's auto completion, all these things. So I think at the very, very beginning, like I think yeah, probably like you kind of need to learn some things before you get too much like auto completion
Yeah.
and like telling you what to do. But I think after that, once you have like kind of like got some general programming knowledge, I would happily give a junior dev like Copilot and like run with it because like it's just gonna be helping you. Copilot's just gonna be getting better. You're gonna be using the job like using that for future things. Like you should be learning it like how it even functions and how to utilize it well. And I also think it's like Copilot's like a different form of like copy and pasting from Stack Overflow. And like, yes, Copilot like might be a little bit smarter, but it's also a little bit dumber sometimes. And it kind of like evens out, I guess. But it's like when I did coding projects in college, like I'd look up Stack Overflow of like how I'd do this snippet in C++, and then nobody felt weird about putting that in their project. And I think this one's like a little bit more gray area, but overall, I'm like, yeah, use the tool. It's basically, similar
Yeah.
premise.
Use the tool.
Use the
It's a
tool.
tool that you can use. Use it.
If you don't
Um,
like it, don't use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't like Copilot. Like there are some very vocal critics of Copilot, some of whom I will be interviewing in the near future. Here
I mean,
on
I think
the
also with
FreeCodeCamp podcast.
some different programming language, apparently, like it's just like a lot worse. TypeScript I find is fantastic, which
Okay.
duh,
So a
they
lot of
like
it
made
probably has to do with
TypeScript.
like the corpus of code on GitHub, as far as like
Yes.
whether it has sufficient training data. If you try to get,
Exactly.
if you try to use Copilot for like COBOL or something like that, you might have.
I've heard
trouble.
even like C Sharp, for example, is just like not as good
Yeah.
compared to
Interesting.
TypeScript.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to know. For all the C Sharp devs out there, we got some C Sharp courses coming. We're working with Microsoft on potentially publishing some additional C Sharp certifications. If you haven't heard, you can get a free C Sharp certification, joint certification from FreeCodeCamp and Microsoft on freeCodeCamp.org. freeCodeCamp.org/learn. Anyway, sorry, little plug for C Sharp.
All
for
good,
anybody
all
out there.
good.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was Eclipse, very popular open source IDE for primarily, I think, Java development.
Yep.
Yeah. And you didn't like, or you felt that it was too powerful for a beginner. Where would you strike a balance? Like for the people out there who are relatively new to learning the code, like dropping somebody into Eclipse versus dropping somebody into another tool that I know you love, Vim.
That's a good one. I actually don't even think it's the end of the world if your like very first editor is Eclipse, and I don't even think it's the worst if you like literally start with Copilot. But I think if I was like trying to craft the ideal learning experience for somebody, I would not put them in that, and I would put them in something like a little bit simpler, just so like they're not trying to like what the heck, why is there this gray like text popping out at the very beginning when they're first just even trying to like mouth feel the word bool and for the first time, like that's not even a word you say. And so that's one thing I feel like, and here's the thing: if your beginner class starts in Eclipse, I think a lot of them probably do. It's like not a big deal. Like you're gonna be fine. Your Eclipse is you're eventually gonna learn anyway. I really think Vim you shouldn't learn until like you're like I'm a programmer. Like I want to be a programmer.
Yeah.
Like I think
a real programmer.
Exactly. Like Vim is
I use
not
butterflies.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like, Vim
I'm
is
gonna
not
link to
worth
this
learning.
excellent XKCD comic about real programmers.
Exactly. Like I love programming and I love Vim. But if you're if you haven't finished, if you don't feel like you're like mildly like proficient at even like one language like Python, Java, C++, and you don't know whether you're going to be programming for the next 10 years, don't learn Vim. Vim is an investment. Vim is a bunch of keybinds to make you code faster. And if you don't think you're going to be coding for the next 5 years, or you don't know whether you're going to be coding for the next 5 years, you should not learn Vim. But if you're at the place where like I was like, man, I'm going to be coding for the next 5, 10 years. And so as soon as that I know that that's a thing for me, I'm going to be investing in like setups that like help me over the long term. And one of those things is Vim. And so I'm a fan of that as soon as you know that for yourself. And maybe that's after your third language you learned. Maybe that's after it's going to be a different breakpoint for different people. But until you're there, I would say not worth learning. And also, I'd say it's even less necessary now that like Copilot is like kind of doing half the work too, and like VS Code is getting better. So I would also only really learn Vim if you use your fingers a lot. Like I also just like would do a lot of coding on a daily basis. If you feel like you're a more like chill programmer, like you're coding like 2 hours a day maybe, then like like Vim still is like nice to know. But like I'd be sitting there like making these tuts and like doing these things, and I'm just like coding a lot during the day, and like I can't be bothered to like move my mouse for like the 100th time. Like I just need some like wapow wapow wapow. So it also is like how drained are you from the like average use case of not using Vim too.
Yeah. And I'll just quickly plug on like not liking to use a mouse. I don't like using my mouse either. I like doing everything with keyboard. I created this video that I'll link to about if you're on Mac OS, you can do almost everything without ever, touching your mouse. They're like these command hotkeys for jumping around in text and stuff. They work in Emacs. I learned them for Emacs actually because my friend was like,
"Oh wow,
Emacs," and then it turns out they work all across terminal on Mac. Like in the actual OS, any text that you're editing. So I just call them the controls hotkeys. But I'll find a link to that and add that too.
Yeah, I have
the keyboard
extension
aficionados
for my browser and for my terminal that I have Vim key bindings on. But
that's cool.
I don't have it at the OS setting. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's just built into Mac, which is kind of cool. Speaking of machines, you're a Linux fan?
I mean, I am a Linux fan, but I'm a Mac user, so that's where I sit in the
Okay.
spectrum.
Yeah. Have you like maintained like Linux machines that you worked on in the past?
So I was on Windows like the first like chunk of my life because I was a gamer. And then I like when I was like, man, Windows is I learned pretty quickly like Windows is like absolutely awful for web development. And like it's gotten like a little bit better with like the Linux subsystem and there's some things that are helping. But like before all those things it was like even worse than it is now. And so I was like I very quickly was like this is not it. And so I tried setting up my own Linux um, setup when I was doing that. The main thing I realized pretty early on for myself is I hate configuring things. I like got so sad sitting there like whenever anything would break. This is part of the reason why I stopped using Vim in terminal and I started using VS Code with Vim key bindings is because like I reached this point where like my favorite part of programming is like building things, not configuring things. As soon as I'm like trying to set things up or things are constantly breaking, I like don't like that. Not a fan whatsoever. Um, and so the fact that things just work in Mac a lot more often than in Linux is the reason why I am now on Mac. Like it is just like things are easier to set up. They happen to just be working more. I don't have to tweak things. And I totally understand that you can like set up your Arch box or your Ubuntu box to be like very close and like get it there. But then like something breaks at some point whenever I did it, and then like I'd be like, "Oh, I just don't want to deal with this." And then so I eventually switched to Mac, and now that's where I live and that's where I program, and
Yeah.
that's where I am in it now. Of like that is the part I care about.
Let's talk a little bit more about your day to day kind of workflows and like how you approach the day. You're a prolific person who seems to have a high degree of like self motivation, and you get things done. And like I would say, of all the things I respect people for, I respect them for being thinking people who have ethics that they adhere to. I think it's the highest virtue one can aspire to is being the what is it the gosh, we're recording this live and I don't do any editing. So, living the examined life, right?
Uh-huh.
That's probably the highest thing. But the second thing I respect people for is not just talking a big game, but playing a big game, like getting things done. And you get so much done. I want to wring some of those productivity tips from Ben Awad while I have him on the call. Maybe you could talk about like what your day to day flow is like when you're in work mode.
I'd say I have one big productivity tip that I think is the ultimate one, which is that I do, which is just sleeping 9 hours. I just think that like for programming and anything that is like you do have to do like a lot of thinking because I think there's a lot of jobs out there that are you could kind of autopilot, but it's really really hard to autopilot coding. Um, you need to sleep a lot, like, and I think I have a lot of friends that sleep 6 or 7 hours and like can get or like do totally fine with that. I tried to do that in college and I've tried to do it in the past because I wanted to like save 2 hours of my life not dirtling in bed and I couldn't do it. I just like everything got worse. I was sadder and like I couldn't get as much done. And for whatever reason, I just feel so much better if I sleep 9 to 10 hours. And I can think way better. I can code so much better. So like that is my tip to anyone out there is like that's my biggest one. If you're trying to be like improve your productivity as a programmer, that's a big one. Is that I think the other thing is just like it's like the boring basic. It's like work out, eat healthy food, like those things I think all like really matter. I notice for like myself particularly, and I don't think I'm any that much different than anyone else. Is just like when I physically don't feel comfortable at my like desk coding, then I will perform worse. Big surprise. So that means like I care a lot about like ergonomic chairs and like a comfy keyboard, and I really like my mouse, and like I want to make sure I don't like have a stomach ache because I ate too much spicy food at lunch, and I just like.
Oh wow! So you really like goes down to your diet, like dietary considerations like that. You avoid spicy food, not because you don't like spicy food, but because of the potential consequences
I mean,
later on in the day.
if I'm like I'm trying to be a productive god, then I'm not eating spicy food. I also really like spicy food, so I mean, it still happens sometimes. Um, but I if I'm trying to like hone in on my productivity, like those are the things that I think about. And like the more I feel good sitting at my desk, the more good work gets done. And so optimizing like a really good desk setup and a really good like environment for that, I think is like very important. And so
Awesome.
that's how I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. What sleep tips do you have? Okay. Like there's probably like entire blogs dedicated to good sleep, and there's like entire companies that have built products around this. But like, what is your sleep setup?
I mean, I think it's really hard, but I think the best one is to have like the same bedtime every night. Because then you like, I think I go to bed at like maybe 10 p.m. And you know, when you hear somebody has a bedtime at 10 p.m., you're just like, loser alert, like they're uncool. And so like it's a tough thing. And like, you know, especially if you're in college, like, you know, Friday night, like things happen and I don't always go to bed at 10 p.m. But like some people, you know, 10 p.m. just happens to work for me. Like maybe 11, it's 11 p.m. for you, or it's 12 p.m. For some people, or like,
Yeah.
you know, midnight. It's different for different people, but I think that's the biggest one is like you just get into a rhythm, and then once you're in a rhythm, it's like so easy to go to bed at that time. I think
Yeah.
the tough part's not actually the sleep part. It's like juggling the social obligations around that. And so that's something you kind of have to figure out with your own life and what you're doing. And like, yeah, sometimes you just, you know, it's tough. Like, you know, it's a balance. You gotta choose where you want to be in the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so like that's the biggest one for me. I think, you know, there's the obvious ones. Don't like use your phone, play video games before bed. Like I'll like read like fiction sometimes if I'm having a rut of not being able to sleep. Like the biggest ones because my brain's like thinking too much before bed. I'll like read a like fiction book to like calm down, like think about something totally different. But I think the biggest one and the hardest one, and that's why if it was easy, everyone would be doing it and everyone would just be waking up feeling energetic and fantastic. Is yeah, having a regular bedtime.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. You're getting the legit straight to pro tips here from Ben.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
so let's talk about, just developer careers, and then we'll end on VoidPet because I want to talk more about that. But like, let's talk about you not going the Fang route. And you've said before in the many, many interviews I've listened to of you over the years, just to prepare for the day that I would eventually interview Ben Awad himself. So you've said, I think in the past, that like the best thing you can do for your developer career is like get a job at Google, because then from the rest of your life, you are a ex-Googler, right? Like, and that's a way to build credibility. But let's say hypothetically that people are like 90+% of people are not like college
Right, only
students
1%
who have
or
a CS
X,
degree who are
right,
like
are getting
gonna
there
just
yet.
talk to some Google rep at like a career fair and be able to get an interview, right? Everybody else is like applying through the front door. Yeah, what are some alternatives to getting a job at like a Fang company that can also permanently kind of like set you up for success? And what have you pursued?
Obviously I took like a very, very different route, which was like not even like getting a job whatsoever. But I think the most important thing is like to set yourself up if for like getting good. So like if you're a good developer, and what I mean by that is I think some people think about like, oh, machine learning or AI pays the most, so then I'm gonna learn AI and I'm gonna do that thing. I think that's a fine way to think about it too, if that works for you, and if it's working for you, fantastic. But I think like the more interesting way to think about it is to like set yourself up to be like very good at the type of developer that you want to be. And like front-end developers can make more money than back-end developers, but back-end developers can also make more money than AI developers if they're very good. Like the caveat's always if you're very good. And so I think like what you should focus on is figuring out and finding the programming niche that you want to really spend the next 10 years on. And that's hard to do. Like, but that's something I thought about when like I was in college and I was trying lots of different subjects. And I just found like I really enjoyed full stack development and I enjoyed building like these applications, and being like a product application developer was my favorite part. But for other people it might be I love making like really cool like animations on the front end, that like mini interactions that are like really beautiful. And I think if you can hone in, the faster you can hone in and figure out what that is for you, and then focus on that, I think that's just like how you can have like a really successful career, is being like very strong at like one of those things. And I think you can also be strong at multiple things, because obviously like to be a strong full stack developer, you also kind of have to be able to like kind of do front end and kind of do back end. So I think you can also you don't have to literally be stuck for 10 years, but at the beginning, I think you should choose one and like build a pillar up and then build another pillar up and then build another pillar up, if you want to be a broader person anyway. But I think that's my biggest tip is like, yeah, not everyone needs to go to Google and to like have a fantastic career. And I think most people honestly end up going to Google after they've gotten their first job. I think like the path forward to like having a strong career is like getting any job. Like the hardest part is like breaking in, I feel like. So getting any software engineering job, even if it's at a small startup, XYZ, to like prove yourself and build up some of these skills and like figure out what you even like, and like what are the like professional environment feels like. Then I feel like you can work your way to Google or work your way to, and I don't even think Google's like like Google was way more prestigious like 4 years ago. I feel
Yeah.
like that. I feel like that they're kind of also losing some of their prestige. Like
Where's the most
maybe like
prestigious place to work right now in 2024?
Dude, I don't even know. I feel like right now the hot thing's AI. I don't know if people really want to work at OpenAI. It's like kind of like crazy with what's happened with Sam and getting kicked off and like coming
Yeah.
back. So maybe OpenAI is like a little bit more turmoil right now. I feel like before that happened, OpenAI was like the hot company to be because they're like on the frontier of AI and that could be take over the world. Um, I mean,
Yeah,
here's
but
the
I
thing.
mean,
I think
Google and Facebook are working really hard on AI as well,
well, they're
right? So,
trying. Like, I think I mean, here's the thing. You can't go wrong with Fang either. Like, I don't think you're gonna be like, darn, I'm not like the most prestigious ever. I'm working at Google now.
yeah,
Google's good. Google's good. Like, you should be happy if you work at Google. I think Google's a good job. Like, if you're happy at Google, you should work at Google. And I think there's like plenty of other places to be happy that you might even like
yeah,
better. Because like a lot of people really enjoy small teams. I'm somebody who really likes small teams, and like Google is going to be a very big machine with a big cog, and like there's some great things like free lunch, but like sometimes free lunch is worth giving up for like having more flexibility and like being able to like, I mean, Google's pretty flexible, so that's a bad example,
yeah,
but like having more like flexibility maybe within your role, and
yeah,
doing touching different parts of the thing. So I think to recap, I'd say one, I think figuring out what you really want to be and specializing is very helpful in your career. And two, like getting that first job, proving yourself and working up the ladder is like you can that's very much like a great way to do it. I don't think if you didn't start at Google you're doomed. I think that's
yeah.
like the wrong
I mean,
way to
and
think
has
about it.
your thinking on that evolved? Because like my understanding is you did go through like several Google interviews, and they kind of like bandied you about, and like at some point you just like lost interest in working for Google, right?
Yeah, so so this was my original thought process in college. I was like, okay, I know eventually I want to like start a startup or do a business of some sort. Like that's my interest. Like I even knew that in like end of high school. I was like, I don't want to work as a regular software engineer, like working at a desk for whatever reason. I just like had that feeling in me. Um, and so when I got to college, I was like, okay, but my plan's gonna be I work at Google for a little bit, and then I'm going to like, pick up some skills and then do this. But honestly, I just like couldn't be bothered to like even the starting to like do the interview process and like start to do the things. I just got like the ick so hard. I was just like, I cannot do this. Like even though like I thought this might be the path forward, I was just like I like leak code to some extent. Like it's kind of fun doing algorithms, but at the same time, it's like kind of not, and it's like kind of useless, and it's like kind of not useless. It's just like I just couldn't be bothered with that whole system. I just really disliked
Yeah.
it, and it just like
You're
wasn't
talking
for
about like
me.
the gauntlet, the whiteboard coding
Yes,
interviews, and
yes, and
you went through some of those with your Google application process.
so for me, I did a okay. There's this thing if you search it on Google. There's a chance like a little pop-up comes up that's like, would you like to do a coding challenge? There's a name for it. I forget what it's called. My friend got that, and then they were like, man, it lets me invite another person to this. So they invited me. I did a little like coding challenge, and basically you're just solving algorithm problems. And if you solve enough algorithm problems, they then invite you to do a second like just like a coding project thing in like a browser. And I think I solved some algorithm thing. I made it to the next like thing in the process, and then I did a like Google Doc thing. That's like the standard Google
Yeah,
interview.
you're kind of
Um,
pair programming, or you're like live
yep,
coding in a Google
yep.
Doc.
I did something, and then I can't remember if I didn't do it good enough or like what happened, but I did a second coding doc interview, and then I either was not good enough or something happened, TLDR, like they were like, the window has closed for this, you know, part of when Google hires for like the new grad positions, and you'd have to wait and reapply in the fall. And I was like, I just don't want to wait 3 months. And it wasn't that long. It was like 2 or 3 months before it was going to be fall, and do it. But I was like, I can't be bothered. I like, if I wasn't good enough now, like I'm not going to wait and reapply and do it then. And then I was just like, I've lost my interest. Like I was already borderline. And then the fact that I just like, I could just tell I was just like going through the motions and like not having a good time even at the beginning. And it wasn't like I was like excitedly like, yes, I just can't wait until I work at Google. As soon as I was doing
Yeah.
my things, I was just like,
So
yeah,
to some
no.
extent, the interview process kind of like killed the romance for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've also applied to, another prestigious institution out there in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, and that is Y Combinator.
True.
Maybe you could talk
Or
a little
Doge
bit about
House.
Y Combinator, the accelerator, like what inspired you to apply there?
That one was simple because basically I don't think that one's like, at the time, I think this institution, some people would argue, has been watered down a little bit. I mean, even back then, it was, you could say that was the case. But I think if you're starting a startup, one of the best places that, like as excited as people were for Google for software engineering, the equivalent for startups was YC. Everyone wants to get into Y Combinator, short for YC. Everyone wants to get into that. That was like the path. That was like what everyone's excited for. So like I actually didn't know too much about it, but when I was making Doge House, I applied to YC because I was like, maybe this startup has a potential. And like obviously like I was I applied with a Doge themed like, clubhouse. So like there were some problems there. But obviously like the point of YC and startup incubators in general is the first idea you land on or you apply with, you may not necessarily stay with, and you kind of figure out what it's going to be, and it might look totally different when you're in the program. I ended up applying late because it was like already past the deadline of when you could apply. So either one, my application wasn't good enough to get past the apply, while I was also late because the project, there could have been like many things going
Yeah.
on there, but TLDR, I got rejected from that. But also basically most people have been rejected by YC, and unlike a lot of other things, YC, there's almost like this stigma around it of like you just apply to YC like lots of times. Like if you're somebody who's dedicated and like trying to do startups and build businesses, like, all right, you might not have your stuff together on the first round, but apply the second round, apply the third round. I think they have some stat like most people that get into YC have applied like 2 or 3 times to it or something. So like there's some I didn't take it as a like crestfallen like I'm never gonna make it, and I was just like this is part of the process. Like this is like and obviously I didn't, and here's the other thing, I didn't go in thinking like there's no way I'm not getting accepted, like this is like the project they're going to take me on. Like I knew I understood from their point of view why they might not have accepted me, and
Yeah.
so there wasn't
Doge
any
House.
kind of like dissidence between where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they didn't take me. But yeah,
Yeah.
I applied, got rejected from Doge House, and that did not happen either. So like I've been rejected from a lot of institutions and places before, and I just like try to keep going. And I also ask myself like, do I even care about working through the rejections and getting to the place, or not? Because like sometimes you don't, and so you shouldn't try to pursue it, and sometimes you should because it's worthwhile. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So just with Google, you did the math and you're like, nah, I don't want to bother with this anymore. And
yeah,
probably
I
with
was like,
YC, you similarly, you're like, because I mean, you probably could have applied with Void. Did you apply with VoidPet?
so we applied uh with VoidPet the like a later year, um but I can't remember if it happened at the same time. We basically got into a different accelerator, so we ended up going to a different accelerator than YC when we applied with VoidPet. So I don't know if we got formally rejected or not. I can't remember. We might have been rejected one time, and then the second time we were planning on applying. But the thing is, we were making a game, and YC you don't really apply to YC making a game. I think there's some people that are in gaming and they do YC and they like maybe do
Yeah.
something, but also YC is kind of like not for that for the most part. So also we kind of knew it wasn't the perfect fit. And there was another like accelerator for gaming that just started. And so it was called Speedrun. And so that was the one we were like, well, this is like a much better fit for us. So we ended up doing that one because it's like actually meant for games. So we ended up doing that one, got into that. That worked out great. And so
Yeah,
we
what
did
was that
that.
experience like? Just for people who are interested in doing like an accelerator, a lot of game devs probably listening to this. Uh, what
I actually
did you?
think Speedrun 3 might be taking applications right now. So like if you're a game dev watching this, like you can go apply Google Speedrun. A16Z is the firm that runs it.
Okay, yeah, that's one
You
of the
can
big ones.
apply.
Andreessen Horowitz. Yeah,
Yes, yep. You can apply to it now, and I think it was fantastic. I think for me, the biggest thing that I got out of it was being in like a cohort of other people building things similar to me. Because before that, I hadn't done anything in gaming. I didn't really know too many people in gaming. I didn't know other people making games that like were also trying to make a business out of it and like had the intensity that I had. So it was also very nice to just like talk with other people that were doing what I was doing. It's like, why is school useful? Why is college good? It's because you have all these people at a similar stage of life that is like you can like talk through what you're going through and like doing that. So I'd say like I would definitely recommend it, and it was very helpful from like that point of view. Also, obviously they give you money, so like you get money to like start your business, and that's like very crucial when you're at the very beginning. So the combination, but like basically every accelerator is going to give you that. So like
yeah.
it's one of those things that's like combination of money and also the cohort and like what you learn from doing that's very powerful, and like I definitely recommend it to people. And like once you're kind of done an accelerator, you're kind of in with that, like you
You
just
have
have
like
like
an
lots of different
alumni cohort
access.
group.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's cool. So you went. It was it an in person? Was there an in person component?
There was an in-person component to this one. This one was optional, but I actually just like lived in SF for a month to do it because I had never really like lived in SF or San Francisco. And so I was like, I wanted to like see if I would like maybe want to move there or not. And so I was there for the month for that. And so it was great like doing stuff in person and like actually hanging around SF for the first time because before that I hadn't spent like that much time there. And so that was last May that I did that. Um, so that was cool, and I
Yeah,
definitely enjoyed the in-person part of it.
and just on a personal, like living in SF, like being a Southwesterner, I guess you grew up in Texas. I partially grew up in
Yeah.
Texas. I'm from Oklahoma City, really. But uh, being out there in California, this is your second big jump out to California. Because my understanding is you lived in LA for a while, and like the
Yep. I lived in
creator
LA for like
economy,
a
the
month or
creator
two.
mecca, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Well, can you talk about like just very briefly, like your experience in LA versus San Francisco versus Austin? Because they're really all three of them are kind of like big tech, cities, if you will. A lot of companies based in all of them that are doing exciting stuff, and maybe what the like local vibe of the communities are, the developer communities are in those three cities, and how you compare
I
and
mean,
contrast in
yeah,
this
I
essay
would
question.
definitely say the stereotypes are true. Like when I went to LA, it's very like entertainment focused. It's very creator focused. Obviously, I was a creator, so I was also going to those things. And I think here's like the other thing too, is like if it really depends the bubble that you're in. Like for example, I feel like LA is really tough to be in if you're not wanting to do and be around creators, entertainment people. And if you're not doing that, it's very hard to like meld with that culture, or you might look like an outsider. Like, and so I think if you're just like a tech person and you show up in LA, people might just be like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here? Like, what is this?" Um, and like, but if you're creating content, all of a sudden, like you're a creator like me, like there's creator parties all the time, and like there's all these things you can do to like do that, and I think that's very cool. And I think the in-person element of that's like really great. And I think SF, like the stereotypes are true. It is a bunch of nerds building things in SF. Lots of big money there. Software things are happening. There's lots of people that care about building startups, and like I I really liked the like culture of SF from that point of view, because like I'm a builder like nerd type as well, and like I really enjoyed that, and I really like people are a lot more humble in SF. I honestly I just feel like the stereotypes are kind of like true. And I think it really depends on like what you're trying to do with like your life and like what your goals are. Like if I was trying to be like the biggest creator, then I would probably like do more things in LA. If I felt like I was also trying to do like in-person things in LA, um, and get the value out of it. And I think if I was trying to make a startup that was like selling to businesses, I would live in SF because that is where the like hub of all these things are happening to. And all my friends have businesses that I might sell my product to. And then like that like network is like very invaluable and you like do that sort of thing. I'm in Austin now for like a very simple reason, which is like Austin's really cheap and I really like the like option of like having like infinite runway and not feeling like there's a lot of pressure to like
Yeah.
bust my I like work really well if I don't have like a glooming pressure on me that I have to do something. And so like I know that for myself, and the fact that I can just like kind of like live like a king in Austin, and like the cost of living is just like a lot more in like LA and SF, that like I have to either be like the trade-offs have to be worth it. And like for us, we kind of know for Void Pet, if we move to LA or SF at the moment, it's not going to make Void Pet 2 times better. But like other businesses, that might be the case. Like your business might get 2 times better if you move to SF or LA. And like we've tried, that's why we like stayed in LA or not LA, SF for the month in like last May, because I kind of wanted to see like would Void Pet be like 2x better if I was in SF for a month, even from doing that. Did I feel like there was there? And there was like we almost moved to SF. It was a pretty close call, but overall we felt like the fact that like the expenses of like living there just like didn't uh
Yeah.
make it
And
worth
it's
it
one of the
when
most
I was
expensive
like,
cities in the world.
yeah,
Certainly, like
yeah,
people think New York City is expensive, but wait till you try to rent an apartment in San Francisco. Like,
they're both just brutal.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons why I moved back to the Southwest. Moved to Dallas is because being like, yes, it was a huge opportunity being in San Francisco, going to meetups every night, meeting all these different founders and stuff. But the cost of living in San Francisco is like 3x living in Dallas. I mean, it was ridiculous. So it was
and
an
I
easy
think
decision.
some people are enabled to make 3x money by living in SF.
Yeah.
And I think other people it's harder to capture that value. And so I think you just have to figure out for yourself and what you're doing whether like that's the case or not.
Yeah. And I mean, you can always go you can always have the inexpensive house in Texas and go spend weeks in San Francisco like I did last summer. Doing all the, tech events and meeting all the
And that's what I
interesting
like too
people.
is I feel like I have infinite like possibility to travel now, because I feel like if I live in SF or New York, I feel really weird like leaving my apartment and leaving that city that I'm paying so much money in to like keep. Whereas like I like if I want to go live abroad for a month, like I don't feel any kind of weirdness, like it not like just like hemorrhaging money at home
Yeah.
because of that. So
And even
yeah,
if you have a lot of money, like it feels bad to spend
yeah,
$4,000 on like a 1-bedroom apartment or something each month.
yeah,
It's like more than $100 a night. That's like staying in a hotel by
yeah.
practically just having an apartment. And so I definitely think that's a good economical decision.
I mean,
And
here's the other thing too, though, is I think I like the culture of like SF and the happenings that's there better. Like I think the tech scene in Austin is like less good. I think it's trying to get there and it's trying, but it's not there quite yet. And so that's the other thing. I kind of also know that like yes, I'm getting this thing for like cheaper, but it's like also coming at this cost. And it's like, well, am I okay with that cost? The answer is like right now, yes. I am like totally okay with that switch, and like I can always fly out and do the events when I like am I like feeling like I want to and need to, and like so yeah.
yeah, and tell us a little bit about your co-founder, like, because I mean, co-founding something is like a marriage from what I understand. Like, of course, FreeCodeCamp, thankfully, like I just created it myself. We haven't had any founder drama or anything like that. But at the same time, I had to do a lot of the early stuff myself. Now, of course, we've got a team. We've got an amazing community of volunteer contributors who are driving things forward and doing most of the work at this point. But like for VoidPet, a lot of the work is being done by you and by your co-founder still, probably. I don't know whether you all have employees yet, but maybe you can talk about like running that startup early stage. You got some degree of traction. You've got a ton of people in the Discord. You got people buying merch. I saw you like
We do
packaging up
plushies.
plushies. Yeah.
Yeah.
talk about
So
startup life.
yeah, so we're a team of three now. We have one game designer. Kind of like between me and Linda, the one thing we were like both kind of missing was like both the experience and also the like desire to like think through a lot of the necessary things you have to do for like creating really good gameplay and loops, and like there's just like a lot of thought process that goes behind the scenes and like keeping games fun and feeling like you're rewarded the entire way through, that it doesn't maybe seem like that from the player, that you're just like, I'm getting stars and I'm leveling up and I'm feeling great. But as soon as you like make them and you create a couple of systems and people stop playing it after a few days because they beat it all and they're like, or they like didn't, they played it for, the other end is like they play it for 6 months and they can't beat it. Like there's like all
Yeah.
these little knobs, and like finally tuning that correctly was like very difficult. Um, but yeah, I really like small teams, and I feel like we get a lot done with like a small team of us, and we were able to get a lot built out. Because here's the other cool thing: is that right now how we feel about our product, and each product is very different. Is right now, our main thing is just like figuring out what we actually want to build and making sure it's like really good. And like that's very difficult, and you have to like, more people thinking about that is not always better. Um, and like between, Linda is fantastic at design and product, and like I'm really good at like coding and building it out and like doing the product together. And the combination of our game developer, and like we feel like we have almost like everything we need to like make Void Pet even better than it is now. And now it's just like a matter of time of like
Yeah.
slowly building this thing and like tuning it. But I mean, this is like how early startup life is all right, we tried this thing. This thing either worked or it didn't work. Let's try it again. Oh, we're in the pit of despair. Things aren't going well. Oh, all of a sudden we're doing like a little bit better. Oh, we're doing worse again. Oh, we're doing a little better. And so this is just like what my life is like that. And like that's just what it is to like run a business. But that's
Yeah.
also why it's fun. Like I really like having the like control of like, man, if I do a really good job, I get really good like things in return. But if I don't do a good job, like it's worse than working at McDonald's. Like I would actually be better if I like was working frying French fries, because I actually just like bankrupted myself, or I just like made such a, I like that level of like accountability. And so I know some people it's like very scary, but I really like that. But yeah,
Well,
I
I
mean
mean,
part of it,
to be
yeah,
completely fair, you've got a skill set, you've got a reputation, you've got all these things to fall back on if
that
this
too.
doesn't work out, right?
I mean, here's the thing too. If you and then that's like very true, which is also like it makes it a lot easier. Like if like the company totally failed, I could go back to like making YouTube videos and like making coding tutorials and like doing that thing. So it's like a lot easier of like, you could say, like a safety net of feel. But
Yeah.
also I think to the process of like making a company makes you very employable as well, because you should be like learning way more skills. Like here's like a thing: if you are starting a company, you are learning more skills at a faster rate than probably at a job. And that's just like kind of the reality of it. It's like at a job, you're probably going to be learning for the first like year or two at that job, and then you're probably going to like slowly peter out your learning curve, which is why a lot of people recommend like changing jobs after a year or two to like maximize salaries and like also maximize learning. That like that's very important. Otherwise you peter out. And I
Hmm.
think that's the cool thing about doing a startup is like you can like, I mean, same thing can really happen in startups too though, is you can like first few years you're like learning, and then you're just kind of like chugging along, and there's no longer a lot of like new learnings. But that's also, you kind of get to choose how fast you learn in a startup is the other thing. It's kind of like homeschooling, you could say. Like how much structure do you want? How you get to choose it for yourself. So I really like choice, as you can probably tell, and
Yeah. So it
flexibility.
sounds like you've optimized a lot of your life around choice, and not necessarily like, I guess you don't even necessarily have the context of having a boss and being in a cubicle and having that I'm going to need you to come in on Sunday, thing.
Yeah, and I did do an internship in college at Bank of America, and that's like a
Okay.
very, that was very clear to me. Like, man, I did not like this. So I did have that experience of like, yep, that's, I didn't like it, not a fan.
Yeah.
Obviously, banks are a little less exciting than say like tech companies, but I was like, I did not like that.
So, I mean, it sounds like some parting wisdom to people listening to this is if they want to do a project, if they want to pursue, what would be like some things you recommend they don't do if they decide to start an entrepreneurial project, like a mobile game, for example?
Honestly, I'd say don't even think about the don'ts. I think you should just enable yourself because I think the main reason like you're gonna fail is not because you didn't go and do the thing, it's because you just like never actually did the thing. I think like it is pretty like I have made so many bad projects. The only reason I even got to VoidPad in the first place is because I didn't give up and I kept building things. And I didn't even think and like you're gonna naturally figure out the don'ts. And you're gonna naturally like those things are gonna come up and you're gonna figure out over time and you learn a lot better on your own. But what you're not gonna do is you're most likely not gonna try it. So I would say I'm not even gonna tell you why you shouldn't make a mobile game. I think you should make a mobile game. I think you should make the game. You should make the app. Like there's enough people telling you why you shouldn't do those things. I'll tell you, go give it a try. Go build the thing.
It's an amazing note to end on. Don't even think about the don'ts.
There's
Thank
enough
you so
don'ts in
much,
the world.
man. I've
Yeah.
learned so much. Like I've got 200 lines in my text editor of notes that I've taken listening to you. I've learned a tremendous amount from you just watching your videos. Of course, even watching your silly TikToks, and frankly, like most of them are silly. At least the ones that you've
Yeah.
done a lot, like your point of view, looking up at me while you're like resting in my lap while I code.
Yep.
It's like weird. But
Yeah.
that's TikTok, right?
That's TikTok for you.
But like I've learned so much from just checking out like of course like watching your React Native tutorial back in the day like was some of my first exposure to like how React Native works and how you get things done with that. And I just want to commend you on putting yourself out there, being so fearless in terms of creating these videos, building this mobile game in an area that you self-profess to not have any real domain expertise in, game development, right? Obviously you
Yep.
played a ton of games. You played League. You did probably lots of other gamer stuff over the years, but
Yep.
to have the audacity to go out there and like build a game on mobile and actually have success with that is incredibly impressive. And I'm very excited to if there's like a demo video or something that you'd recommend we share to give people an idea of like the core gameplay loop or something like that. Let me know and we can put that in the show notes. Again, lots of links in the show notes. Be sure to check out some of this cool stuff. Ben, what's next for you? Like, what does the next 6 months look like the rest of 2024?
I'm just grinding. I'm coding. That's what you're gonna see me doing. And that's what you should do. Code at freeCodeCamp.com.
Yeah, freeCodeCamp.com will redirect you to freeCodeCamp.org. But
Oh,
yes,
it's .org now.
oh, yeah, we got both, but we're a charity, so we use .org.
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, like, I hope you all walk away with a ton of inspiration, a ton of like forward momentum that Ben has imparted here. He's said so many interesting things throughout this conversation. I just want to thank you for carving out time out of your busy schedule, being a game dev, getting things
Thank you for
done,
having
being
me.
a startup founder. And yeah, until next week, everybody, happy coding.
See ya.